Hello, seventh episode, and it's Commanders time. Or is it Redskins? As Donald Trump kind of insists they will get back to. Ah, I don't know. The ship doesn't know. The AI doesn't know because, ask clearly for Commanders, and is this much more of a Redskins logo? I will leave it to the politicians. Well, what is time? It's time to be excited about the Commanders. Or, it's time to be excited about Washington. Let's start. And we start with looking at their draft as we usually do. Their draft was hampered by some of the deals they made in the offseason, bringing Larry Tunsil, bringing Deebo Samuel, so they did not necessarily have that many picks. And how they used it? That kind of reflects it. So I kind of have sneaky problem with Josh Connolly pick because I don't understand it, man. Especially in the draft when you don't have that many picks, when you, I would say, are in a Super Bowl window based on what Jayden Daniels did. Josh Connolly is not the pick I would make, and the reason behind this is very, very simple. You just brought Larry Tunsil here. He's going to be your left tackle for at least 3 years. And last year, drafted in the second round Brandon Coleman, who, for a rookie tackle, I think he did a pretty good job. And you also have veteran in Andrew Wiley, who probably is going to swing up towards interior and is going to be like a backup there. But I would say, if you have Larry Tunsil on left tackle, Brandon Coleman as your right tackle, and Andrew Wiley as your swing tackle, you are kind of in a really nice position with veteran lockdown player on one side, then veteran backup option that gives you floor in case Brandon Coleman doesn't really have what it takes to be an NFL tackle, especially switching from left to right. And that's absolutely fine. You bring Josh Connolly into the mix, and suddenly, what you do with Brandon Coleman? I don't know, man. Is Brandon Coleman a guy that you cannot push aside for a special prospect? No, he is not. At the same time, you just spent second round pick on him, and he was actually okay for a rookie tackle. So what are you doing? And it's not like Josh Connolly was mega value. I mean, for normal team that wouldn't have this conundrum with Coleman and Wiley there, I would say this is like a B pick, but pretty good value. I mean, I'm going to rarely be against drafting a tackle. I would build my team from the trenches. So criticizing picking a tackle, especially when you have great asset in your almost rookie quarterback in Jayden Daniels, it's hard. It's kind of hard for me to criticize it, but I really don't get the thinking behind this. If Brandon Coleman had this huge potential to be a great guard, and they would be like, okay, so Nick Allegretti is a veteran that we want to move from, then I would be okay, kind of get that plan, but it seems like it's clearly not the plan. And the plan seems to be, well, Connolly or Coleman are going to be our starting right tackles. So I would say one of those guys are going to get pushed aside that you've invested heavily in last two drafts. So that's weird. I don't know, Commanders fan, you can tell me why I'm wrong on this one, but I, from the perspective of value, I'm not a huge fan of this, especially when you don't have picks to waste around, when you are not thinking about the long term, when it's okay, but in 3 years we could have Josh Connolly on one side, Brandon Coleman on the other, when Larry Tunsil perhaps retires and stuff like that. That's freaking 3 years from now, and you are in your Super Bowl window because Jayden Daniels is freaking awesome. So I don't know. I don't like this pick. I don't necessarily hate it because I think value is right, tackles, everything, I understand that part. But in terms of roster building, where this position was prior to this draft, I'm not a fan. Then Trey Amos, kind of completely the opposite. I think he kind of solidifies cornerback position for them for future years, where we talk Marshall Latimore and not necessarily continue with what kind of player he was perhaps 2 years ago. Also injury-riddled guys. They signed veteran Jonathan Jones, so Trey Amos doesn't have to start. He probably won't start, but he can definitely be a guy that is there as a very, very solid option in case of somebody is going to get hurt. And also he's there, to fight for the starting position, because I don't think it's given to Jonathan Jones. I also like the potential of Mikey Sanders still, just going back to being a slot. And then number 2 corner position is much more open with Marshall Lattimore injury history, Jonathan Jones being a veteran. Then suddenly Trey Amos, he can definitely emerge as a starter in the season. Jalen Lane, I think it was kind of an okay value, nothing special to talk about in my eyes. Then Kyle Medrano, a guy I didn't have on my draft boards. I don't think I didn't have draftable thinking over him, so there's a bit of a worry when you spend a draft on him. For me, when you only have 4 draft picks, so overall, I'm not super excited about how they handled this draft. Though I kind of like what they did with the picks they didn't have in the draft, turning them into Laremy Tunsil and Deebo Samuel. Overall, not my favorite draft, clearly. And also when I thought about Commanders and how they handled the offseason, it's kind of a theme. I like some of the moves. Laremy Tunsil, I think even Deebo move is pretty decent. But some of the moves, like Javon Kinlaw, in my eyes, a huge overpay, feels kind of weird. And before we continue to look at the depth chart of this team, I felt like this was actually very interesting, almost like a case study, because in back-to-back years, we had something that didn't necessarily happen in last couple of seasons in the NFL, where a team that had number 2 pick and was still, after that pick, projected to really finish bottom of the league in Texans and then in Commanders, both selected quarterback at number 2. Both quarterbacks massively outplayed number 1 guys and got their teams into the playoffs, even win playoff games. And in the case of CJ, it was just 1 playoff game, but they won the division, they won a playoff game, and in case of Jayden Daniels, they actually won 2. And it was interesting whether they would learn from some of the mistakes / eagerness that the Texans did last offseason. And I didn't necessarily think so. In my eyes, Washington should be absolutely, after what happened last year, the free agent should effing line up to get here. Because what do you have? If you are a defensive player, you have Dan Quinn, and you have a great franchise QB in Jayden Daniels. So what more do you want as a defensive player? And as an offensive player, you are getting balls from Jayden Daniels, and you actually have Cliff Kingsbury, who I feel like did a tremendous job with this offense last year. And he might, let's say, suck as a head coach, but as an offensive coordinator, I think he's pretty damn good. And somehow, someway, they didn't really get the most desired free agents, at least in my eyes. I mean, maybe Milton Williams, maybe just Sweat didn't want to go to division rivals. I don't necessarily think that was the case. I feel like if you match the offers for Milton or for Josh Sweat, I would think that they should be much more inclined to go here. And, given how much you paid for Javon Kinlaw, you could have perhaps had Milton Williams for more, but I would say much better player. So, okay, I'm glad that you clearly feel like this is your window and you are spending the money and you are going big. Great. I liked it about Texans and I liked it about Commanders, but at the same time, I feel like with such a great opportunity that kind of emerged out of nowhere, where you have a lot of money to spend because you have some budget and some cap space, and also you should be really the place that players desire to play, because everybody wants to win. And does winning necessarily mean that those guys will turn down $5 million a year more at some other places? Probably not for most of the guys, but you had the money to give them comparable offers to what they get. So why not go for it? So that's kind of one thing that it really felt like it was very, very similar approach. Aggressive, but maybe not necessarily getting good bucks on their returns. I hope for Commanders they are going to prove me wrong on this front, because like I want them to succeed. I like Dan Quinn from his stay with the Seahawks, and I like with Jayden Daniels. I was so effing wrong on him, and like I just cannot wish this young man even more success than he had last year. So like I wish him to have all the success in the world. He was absolutely awesome, man. So I hope they prove me wrong. If this team does not reach, let's say, conference championship, because that's kind of the expectations for a lot of people out there, or at least like a top 8, meaning the divisional round, we might look at this offseason and kind of pinpoint that perhaps they could have done more. Okay, so that was kind of the mental thought I had about them, how they compared to the Texans, and to finish it up, it's just such a massive opportunity, man, for both Commanders and the Texans. Like, you have a great guy for 4 more years on a very cheap deal compared to what he's going to earn after that. Then you just, like, you need to cash in. Like, if Commanders don't win Super Bowl in the next 4 years, it's going to be a disappointment. Like, it's easy. Like, it's going to be a disappointment. Of course, unless, Jayden Daniels regresses or gets injured. Like, barring those, I think they should definitely have Super Bowl in their eyes for next 4 years. And it should be a disappointment if they don't get it. Well, with that being said, let's take a look at the depth chart and how they are stacked for this season. So, this offensive line that definitely outplayed a lot of people's expectations last year. They felt like, okay, we did a lot with not a great amount of talent. Let's bring some more talent. And they did it by bringing Laremy Tunsil, who is one of the best pass-protecting left tackle in the entire league. And, giving him to Jayden Daniels definitely fits. The fact that he is not necessarily an excellent run blocker in an offense that's going to rely heavily on running worries me slightly, but, there are very, very few guys that I would like more to protect blindside of my QB than Laremy Tunsil. So, and especially for the price that they were able to get him, no worries there. Nick Allegretti, one of the guys that played the entire year last season, and he is replaceable level starter, but he did his job last year. I think he surprised a lot of people that he was able to hold his own. And again, they could think about upgrading this position in the future, but as of right now, I think they are pretty okay with him as a starter. Next to him, Tyler Biadasz, really nothing wrong to say about him. He's kind of your average to slightly, perhaps even above average center in the league, where actually the pool of really good centers is kind of shallow, especially after the retirements of Jason Kelce and Frank Ragnow. So Tyler Biadasz might be even like a top 10 guy. He was pretty solid, nothing special, but that's kind of where you get your actually good starters at the center. Next to him, Sam Cosmi. I mean, I'm so glad that he at least got some of the recognition that he deserves, because he was buried on Commanders roster in the last couple of years where they didn't necessarily had too much success, and he was still playing his ass off, and he was really, really good. And I think last year he was able to show it, though it was not necessarily his best year, I would say. So I'm excited to see him improve even more. And we already talked about situation in the right tackle, where you have, I guess, camp battle between Josh Connolly and Brandon Coleman. As of right now, it seems like Josh Connolly is going to win it. I mean, okay, why not when you invest it? The thing about this offensive line is that as its current state, barring that either Connolly or Coleman or even Wiley, if it comes to that, are going to be at least solid. this is pretty good offensive line, from last year where we had a lot of questions. It was like Wiley, Cosme, Biarash, Allegretti, and Coleman, like a rookie, 2 unproven veterans from Chiefs that came here, hope that they can turn to be starters. Good but not great center from the Cowboys, and one rock solid guy in Sam Cosme. We felt like this was one of the worst offensive lines in football. Right now, like, is it one of the best? Not. No, but could this be top 10 unit in the league? I think it could be border on that. I wouldn't say as of right now, but definitely very, very good unit. The good thing, before we go to Jayden Daniels, is that they have actually a ton of depth. Like, they are deeper than most of the lines in the league, which kind of speaks volume about how they want to approach this. And that's like one major difference between them and the Texans, where Texans kind of, traded Laramie Tunsil, and their offensive line is kind of a train wreck. And I'm worried about CJ Stroud. I am not worried about Jayden Daniels, because you have Nate Herbig as a backup and perhaps a guy that could compete with Nick Allegretti. You have Andrew Wiley, who's moving inside, where again he probably could compete. And you also have Brandon Coleman. Like I said, I felt like he was pretty solid last year for a rookie tackle. So you are kind of 8 deep, and Michael Dieter, Trent Scott, I wouldn't want to go there, but it's not the worst 9 and 10 option for this team. So, they can definitely survive an injury or two. And like, it's going to be not detrimental for this team. Like, even if 2 best guys go down in Sam Cosme and Laramie Tunsil, and you have to go to like Nate Herbig and Brandon Coleman, this is almost the same situation that you kind of faced at the start of last year, where it was pretty bad, but you made it functional. And this year we talk about, well, this is kind of the worst case scenario if 2 of our best guys are going down. So that's a pretty good situation to be in, and I totally applaud Commanders to handle a situation like this, because protect your man is absolutely key. And it's like why I'm like, so not surprised that I'm so negative about Connolly pick, but I would much rather like to have another Nate Herbig in and use that first round pick for a guy that to me has much higher chance to contribute for Jayden Daniels, at wide receiver 3, for example, edge rusher, for example. That this team would improve more with that first round pick than you do with Josh Connolly over Andrew Wiley and Brandon Coleman. Okay, but now let's go to the star boy. Let's go to Jayden Daniels, and what a year, man. Like, it was special. I don't know which week I was like, oh, my take is not going to age well. Like, probably week 4. Yeah, week 5 maybe. This dude was legit, like, almost an MVP candidate, because like getting that team the way it was built last year, that beside him you would argue that it was like one of the worst rosters in the league, to get him into conference championship, where like, okay, Eagles beat them, but still you felt like he was not overwhelmed by the Eagles defense, which happened to Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl. Jayden was like, well, yeah, just a regular Sunday for me. And that has to be scary for every opponent out there, because you knew that they've thrown almost everything in him, and he stay composed, stay poised, and in theory his roster around him should only get better for the upcoming 4 years, because before you have to pay him, the same way as he should only improve. And if that's the case, then I will refer back to my point. If you don't win Super Bowl with him on a rookie deal, it's massive disappointment to me. I'm super excited to watch him play. I'm like, one thing that I will mention with Jayden is like, if they repeat and are really potent offense this year, which I think they will be, Cliff Kingsbury might get some calls about head coaching job. Franchises in NFL are not necessarily how to say it, like trending towards never repeating mistakes, because I'm not sure that Cliff would handle head coaching opportunity as good as some other candidates, but why not? Could they continue their success with new OC? Because I think that could be a situation that is going to happen to Jayden during his rookie contract. Do I actually worry about that? I mean, a little bit, but really a little bit. Let's do this also. Now, let's take a look at the weaponry he has to work with. And, well, while it's better than it was last year, it's not necessarily like great. Because when you actually look at this, Zach Ertz, he had resurgence last year. Great year for Zach Ertz. He was kind of Adam Thielen for Bryce Young-esque, in that sense that he was the security blanket, and like really smart and savvy veterans that definitely proved that he can still play on the highest level. But still, like, we are a year removed from when he looked absolutely washed. He's there with an edge. Then you have Debo, who, I mean, once upon a time, probably was like a top 10 weapon in the NFL, perhaps even top 5 weapon. Like 3 years ago, yeah, the things they were able to do with him at San Francisco were stunning. But given his play style, he just suffers much more contact than your average wide receiver, and it's kind of start to show up on his body, where it's more injuries, where it's like lacking the absolute elite burst when he has the ball in his hand. So that is a question for me, like how often is he going to be on the field and how effective is he going to be? And when you look at it like this, then you have Terry McLaurin, who is your number one, like really close to that elite status player. Perhaps I should have placed that on him. I still think there is still a tiny bit missing. But this guy is now in the middle of the contract dispute with Steve, and like on one side, I understand he's going to be 30, and you're like, okay, perhaps we don't want to give you top end money. At the same time, like, this guy just saw you spend a ton in the offseason. He's been an amazing servant for Washington team throughout the years. He survived a lot of mediocre quarterbacks. And also, like, if you really look at the situation, like, he's in a great spot to kind of push this team, because without him, this offense suddenly like doesn't have too much to offer to support Jayden Daniels. So to me, you kind of have to pay him at least what, not necessarily what he thinks he's worth, but you are going to go out there, and I think it could be like 3 years, 100 million, something like this, that those sides could make a deal. Because, if you don't have Terry, like, yeah, this group of weapons suddenly doesn't look fine at all. Noah Brown, I mean, solid player. I would much more prefer that he would be number 4. They have some depth in Luke McCaffrey, Jalen Lyon, kind of, mid-round picks from last 2 drafts that I'm not super high on. And there's also Michael Gallup, who, can he resurgence his career here? Perhaps, but that's definitely far from giving. And that's kind of it in terms of like receiving weapon. You're not talking about running backs yet, because like in terms of tight ends, you have John Bates, you have Ben Sinnott, not necessarily great receiving weapons. So whilst obviously this team is going to run ball heavily and use play action and everything, you still need some guys to actually be able to stretch the field, to be able to, kind of do wide receiver stuff. And, you are injury from Debo and not resolved contract dispute with Terry McLaurin from having Noah Brown as your wide receiver 1. Good luck with that. So, again, when we talk about Josh Connolly, spending that first round on perhaps a wide receiver or a tight end, They were not necessarily the greatest spots for those guys at that point. Perhaps trade down, acquire some picks that you didn't have, to throw some darts and select tight end or wide receiver around 35, 40. That could have been the case. As of now, when healthy and not declining, this is a pretty damn good group of weapons. Not special, but pretty good. How often do we actually see them without the decline? Yeah, that's much more bigger question. In terms of running backs, you have Brian Robinson, you have Austin Eckler. Is this the most exciting running back room in the league? I wouldn't say so. I feel like based on how they performed last year, they kind of deserved the shot of continue being this backfield for this team, even when this draft offered so many running back talents, which again, with the cornerly pick, looking for trade down, recoup, 4th, 5th round picks, and take a swing at some of the running backs that were falling there. That would probably be my strategy. They did not necessarily go into that direction. So overall, at its absolute best, this is quite nicely functional group, but I don't think there is super great floor for them, because running backs at their floor, they're probably slightly below average room, or perhaps close to average room. And Zach Ertz and the decline, Debo and injuries, Terry and contract disputes, there are question marks about every single weapon that you want to count on. Now, in terms of backups overall for this offense, we already talked about most of them. There's a hope that Ben Sinnott could be more than a blocking specialist, which is kind of what he was last year. I don't necessarily see that. There's hope that Luke McCaffrey is going to, emerge with his genes from his brother Christian. I don't necessarily see that as a true. I'm really happy with how they have handled the offensive line, as I talked. And I'm also happy that Marcus Mariota continues here. I think he's great mentor for Jayden Daniels, great guy that could run this offense if Jayden goes down for 1 or 2 games. Yeah, I like that side. In terms of weapons, there is a lot to be desired in my eyes. Now, let's switch towards defense. And there was a lot of moving parts over the last 2 years that left this defensive line in, still below average shape. Dorrance Armstrong is your number 1. That's not the most exciting thing in the world. Darren Payne, it's good that he can bring pressure from interior, but he kind of became low-key abysmal run defender last couple of years. Next to him, Georgia Newton did not necessarily have a rookie impact that I would say a lot of us predicted. And then you have the 3 guys who, for money, and I think it was 7th round pick. Yeah, he's a solid player for this type of money. Definitely bring him in, but you would much rather have him as your rotational piece rather than probably a starter. Now, I know what you guys thinking. Where is the newest addition in Von Miller? Well, I have him in backup room. Why? Well, the reason behind having one in a backup room is I think he's going to be that for I would say majority of the season, in terms of I actually do expect them to kind of save him and Dietrich Weiss having more snaps than Von Miller. They will, I would say, given his health situation, I really don't expect him to play much more on running down. So first down work should go to Dietrich Weiss, and he should be out there for rushing the passer on 3rd downs and really do what he does best. I think it could increase for games with high difficulty, high implications for the playoff picture, etc. But the overall plan should be, let's have him the most ready he could be for the playoffs, because I really think that's going to be. In terms of addition, he's going to cost $6 million a year for 2025. He signed a 1-year deal, totally top-notch addition. I really like this one. There is almost nothing to lose there. This kind of only has upside in my eyes. But overall, in terms of like actual work, like how many snaps the guys are going to play, I would say this is the 4 that's going to eat up the most. You can argue that in that case, perhaps Jerry Newton should not be here because they've signed Javon Kinlaw for a hefty amount of money. I mean, like I said previously, this was one of my least favorite moves of the offseason. I don't necessarily think that Javon Kinlaw offers you that much more than Jerry Newton. I think he definitely has lesser ceiling, and for this amount of money, yeah, I was not a fan. Let's make this one clear. So, I mean, he might outsnap Jerry Newton, which, you know, part of me says, well, that's why I dislike this move even more, because, you know, like I want Jerry to emerge as this premier defensive tackle for them, because I think he has that potential, and they kind of need that. I do understand that Dan Quinn's defense kind of needs Javon Kinlaw, or like they can have a very good use of him. So I think I originally had this as an F, because I feel like this is outrageous overpay. When, you know, studied a little bit more, looking at how this scheme could work, he could really get nice numbers, could really get a lot of sacks that Dan Quinn could be able to like make a lot of scheme work for him to get, you know, like even 1-0 or just really favorable matchups that he can use. But does he solve the problem of this interior being kind of poor run defense? No, which was something that actually cost them, especially against the Eagles in my eyes. Hence, like, this is why I like him even more. Like, he at least gives you some of the run defense from the edge, but he doesn't solve that. He also, like, I would say he would eat from Jerry Newton snaps, or like from those snaps that you would like to give Jerry Newton opportunities, and like he was way too costly. So easy to say, not my favorite move. Overall, when I look at this D-line, I still have problem with run defense. You know, like there is not a good run defender here. You know, beside the two guys who's, you know, like, is he your best run defender and he's a veteran from the edge? Like, that's worrying. That's definitely worrying. The good thing is you have Bobby Wagner behind these guys who can shore up some of the shortcomings of this D-line in terms of run defense, because he is still perhaps the best run defending, or like top 3 to 5 run defending linebacker in the league. Like, this guy is effing awesome. In terms of coverage, yeah, like he doesn't have the sideline to sideline speed that, you know, it goes with age, but you can kind of work this defensive line and its problems with run defense by having Bobby Wagner behind them, but still I think it could be a major issue, especially when you have to face Eagles twice a year, and they might be, quite frankly, a team that you have to face in the playoffs. So, you know, like, I love Bobby Wagner to death. I am like so excited that he is still competing at the highest level and that he is with Dan Quinn. Totally great story. But, you know, like, when I combine him with this D-line, it still comes as quite a bad run defense, and that could cost this team. Next to him, Frankie Louvu. I felt like this was a very nice match from the beginning. Dan Quinn find a way to use both of these guys to the best of their abilities, and I think they are pretty exciting linebacker duo that actually helps their team to success. That you don't say that about many linebacker rooms in the league. Of course, you can question whether like their coverage skills are what they need to be, but you know, that's where I would say this defensive line helps, because in terms of pass rush, yeah, they will be able to generate it. So the fact that you don't have the best coverage linebackers, should not worry you that much also with the upgrades in the secondary. Now, let's talk about the secondary, shall we? Is it good? No. But compared to last year, it should not be a weakness, or it should not be like a glaring problem. So Marshall Lattimore is a big wildcard for this team. Like health and I would say quite a bad performance last year. Yeah, but we all know what Marshall was at his best. Can he still reach it out, or can he at least like solidify himself as a pretty solid number one corner? I think that's definitely a possibility of the outcome. You had Mike Sanders still, who had amazing rookie year. I hope he goes more to play as a slot rather than outside corner, because for outside you have Jonathan Jones. Then I signing, kind of a veteran option that you bring for cheap. And for several teams, I would say he would compete for number one outside corner. So that's pretty good, right? Then you have Trey Amos that you have just drafted. So I would say between these four players and also Noah Igby Nogene, I hope I said it right, this should be definitely a workable cornerback room that has veterans in Marshall and Jonathan and has really interesting young pieces in Trey Amos, Mike Sanders still, and Noah. So I'm not worried about this cornerback room. It could be, I think, even a strength of this team, but even at its floor, it should not be like a huge problem. In terms of safety room, it's not the most exciting one in the world. Quan Martin, Will Harris, also have Percy Butler like to rotate around. I think it's definitely below average room. In Quan Martin, do I trust that he could emerge as top 20 safety in the league? I think there is still outcome in which this can happen, but would I bet on it? Not really. So this is probably going to be some of the rooms that you get by and you just live with. You didn't invest heavily in this and you are kind of okay with that. You kind of need to have these types of rooms in your team in salary cap space situation, and I'm not critical of this. Like I'm definitely saying you can do much worse on when you have safeties on a budget. Yeah, you can do much worse than Quan Martin and Will Harris. So overall, solid room, nothing that should cost you a season. So when you look overall at this defense, what scares me is run defense. Like it does scare me. Like I'm not going to lie. And especially when Eagles are your main competitor in a division and potentially even in conference. And also, if you look at perhaps the second biggest contender in Lions, what are they absolutely special at? Running the ball. Even without Frank Ragnow, they should be still really, really effing good in that. So not shoring up that, that scares me. And if we are talking about the division that we started the road to the Super Bowl with, aka NFC West, which to me has teams that, perhaps are not like your biggest competitors, but you probably will face them, at least one of them, in the playoffs. I would say most of them actually want to run the ball as well, a lot. I would say pretty much all of them, like, is going to be the identity of the team. For sure Rams, for sure Seahawks. You can slightly question it more with the 49ers and Cardinals, but I still think they are going to be running heavily compared to average of the entire league. So, for this team to have so much money, to have, the whole off-season where you have your franchise guy, to not attract players that would make me feel at least slightly better about the prospect of running game, of opponents like not being pain in the ass every single game, I'm a little bit disappointed. I believe they have a plan. I believe in Dan Quinn. I believe in Bobby Wagner. But, just from the outside looking in, trying to analyze the situation, I'm not super happy. Now let's take a look at the schedule before we wrap things up. Yeah, obviously we could talk about some of the backups here. I already talked about Jamal Kinlaw and Von Miller. They also go with Clelin Ferrell, kind of a solid edge 3-4, solid depth piece. We talk about Noah and Percy Butler for the secondary. In terms of linebackers, they are very, very shallow in terms of depth. Like they have like Nick Bellor, who is like former fullback from the Seahawks, I believe, if I'm not super mistaken, listed as their first linebacker of the depth chart, which is like okay, not really not. So perhaps Jordan McGee. Yeah, I would say if Frankie Louvu or Bobby Wagner goes down, they really need to look at veteran market for linebackers. And let's make a prediction. Week 7, Demario Davis to the Commanders. Like you want a guy that can shore up running game from the position of linebacker, just as Bobby Wagner can, kind of rotate this veteran around and perhaps like help you with depth and everything here. Yeah, I think that could work. So yeah, let's make a fun prediction. Demario Davis to the Commanders by week 7. We will see how that works. Now, let's take a look at the schedule. Their start does not necessarily look very, very tough. Like you have Giants, you have Raiders, you have Falcons, you have Bears, 4 teams that did not make the playoffs last year, and then 2 teams that did in Packers and Chargers but were one and done. So for a team that went to the conference championship, we would say that's not that scary of a start. To me, it's actually a sneaky tough start. Well, why? Well, first, dispute with Terry. I hope it's gonna get figured out by this, but again, because as of now, training camp starts and it's not. Maybe there is going to be some growing pains with how the situation is handled, when he's going to join the team, etc., etc. And also, like, I would say winning at Packers or at Chargers is going to be pretty hard, and going 4-0 against the other teams as well. So this is actually a sneaky tough start, and they might stumble. I actually don't think they would stumble more than 4-2 because I still believe that Jayden Daniels is just special. But boy, oh boy, am I excited about like week 1, this offensive line and Jayden Daniels against Giants. Yeah, that's low-key one of my favorite matchups of week 1. Then let's take a look at the second part of the schedule, where my team is protect the captain, obviously with Laramie Tunsil here. They brought him to protect, and now it's going to be the time because Dallas Cowboys and Micah Parsons, Kansas City with Chris Jones, Seahawks with Mike Mack and the whole defensive line that's going to get after him, Detroit Lions with Aiden Hutchinson, Ali McNeil, and Miami Dolphins, well, if their edge players are healthy in Chop, Bradley Chubb and Phillips and Jaden Phillips, it's like, yeah, that's pretty damn good edge trio. Like the health is a problem, but they will need to protect Jayden Daniels because they are going to go after him. I still think they should be able to do so and win this stretch 3-2. And then, last part of the year, I think they will actually have to earn it the hard way to make it to the playoffs because Broncos at home, not an easy matchup. At Vikings and Giants, And then you have 2 matchups against Eagles and Cowboys at home. This is going to be a really hard stretch. I think Jayden Daniels is going to have to take, again, this team on his shoulders and really will them towards the playoffs. I don't think it's going to be a walk in the park for them. That's like one thing that a lot of people, I would say about Texans, about Commanders, when they are like, okay, they were this good last year, so they are only going to get better. Well, they do underestimate the part when the schedule gets much, much harder than it was last year. Because they are suddenly not the last place team schedule, but they are playing most of the times division winning schedule. For the Commanders, it's not that, but they are in division with the Eagles, so yeah, that's pretty damn hard. And like with other teams, have to face Lions, have to face Chiefs, Broncos, Vikings, Chargers, yeah, the schedule is pretty damn hard. So I actually predict them to finish 10-7, so decline from last year's performance. But at the end of the year making the playoffs. And, there, I think they are definitely a team that's showed to us that they can win on the road and go on a run. So I'm excited about this team. I'm not as excited as I would imagine I would be after the season started. Like, I feel like there could have been done more in the offseason to really make this team Super Bowl contender no matter what. I think they, in right circumstances, can be, but there is still way too much question marks for me to really put them towards the teams that I trust to be in the Super Bowl bubble come end of the year. But again, I really like them, and I just hope that Jayden Daniels continue to absolutely shatter my expectations that I had of him. Thank you very much for listening. If you are still here, please leave a like, leave a subscription so you don't miss another episodes of this show. We will be back very, very soon, wrapping up this series, not this series, but this division with the Eagles. Thank you very much and have a nice day.